The day my family disowned me didn't arrive with shouting or chaos. There were no raised voices, no broken plates, no dramatic exits. That would have been easier. Instead, it came quietly, like a decision made long before I ever entered the room. We sat around the dining table where I had celebrated birthdays, shared meals, and once believed I belonged. The air felt heavy, as if even the walls knew what was about to happen. My father sat at the head of the table, his posture stiff, his eyes cold and distant. My mother kept her gaze fixed on her folded hands. My brothers stared anywhere but at me. "We've talked." My father finally said, his voice calm in a way that felt cruel, "And we've decided this is where things end." I felt my chest tighten. "And," I asked, though I already knew, "you're choosing your own path." He continued, "That means you're choosing it without us." All because I refused to sign away my share in the family company. All because I questioned decisions made in secret. All because I asked for fairness instead of obedience. I waited for someone to interrupt him, for my mother to say my name the way she used to when I was hurting, for one of my brothers to remind him that I was still family. But silence surrounded me like a verdict already passed. "If you walk out today," my father said, finally meeting my eyes, "don't come back." Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. I stood up on shaking legs, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I looked at each of them, searching for even the smallest sign of regret. There was none. I packed a single suitcase that night. As I walked out of the house, I realized how easy it was for them to erase me. No calls, no messages, no second thoughts, years of love, reduced to a closed door. That night, alone in a borrowed room, I cried until my throat burned. Not because I lost money or comfort, but because I lost the people who were supposed to love me without conditions. They didn't just disown me, they made me feel like I had never mattered at all, and somewhere between the tears and the silence, I made a promise to myself. I would survive this, and one day they would know exactly who they walked away from. The first few months after being disowned felt unreal, like I was living someone else's life. I woke up every morning expecting a message from my mother or a call from my father telling me it had all been a mistake. My phone stayed silent, days passed, then weeks, and slowly the truth settled in. They had moved on without me. I took whatever work I could find, jobs that barely paid the rent, jobs where no one knew my last name or cared about my past. At first, that anonymity hurt. I had grown up being someone. Now I was invisible. But invisibility also came with freedom. At night, exhaustion would hit me all at once. I'd lie awake in small, unfamiliar rooms, listening to the hum of the city, replaying every word spoken at that table. I wondered if I had been too proud, too stubborn, but each time doubt crept in, I reminded myself why I had walked away. I wanted dignity, not permission. I started learning again, not in classrooms, but through mistakes. I studied business models during lunch breaks, watched market trends late into the night, and saved every spare coin instead of spending it on comfort I couldn't afford. While my family's company expanded through shortcuts and inherited power, I focused on patience and understanding. There were moments I almost broke, days when rejection piled up and failure felt personal, days when I passed restaurants we used to eat at and had to turn away before memories crushed me. But pain became my teacher. It showed me where I was weak, and where I refused to quit. One evening, after a long shift, I realized something startling. I wasn't surviving for them anymore. I wasn't trying to prove I deserved a seat at their table. I was building something that belonged entirely to me. I began making small investments, careful ones, ones that grew slowly but steadily. I met people who respected my ideas instead of silencing them. People who listened, people who didn't see my past as leverage. Years passed quietly, no announcements, no applause, just progress, and somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for my family to regret their choice. I no longer needed their validation to feel whole. They thought cutting me off would break me. Instead, it taught me how to stand on my own, and how dangerous a person can become when they have nothing left to lose. Success didn't arrive loudly. There were no celebrations, no public recognition, no one clapping as doors opened. It arrived in numbers, contracts, and meetings held behind glass walls where my past didn't matter. Only my decisions did. By the time my name began to circulate in industry circles, years had already passed since the night I left my family's house. I had built a reputation as someone patient, precise, and impossible to pressure. People trusted me because I never rushed, never boasted, and never needed credit. That was how I learned about the opportunity. Their biggest rival, the one my family had spent years trying to push out of the market, was struggling. Not because it lacked potential, but because it lacked direction. Investors were leaving, leadership was divided. What others saw as a sinking ship, I saw as a future waiting for the right hands. I kept my interest quiet. Meetings happened through intermediaries. Lawyers spoke in neutral tones. Documents were reviewed late at night, when the world felt small and focused. With every signature, I felt something shift. Not excitement, not pride, but calm certainty. This wasn't revenge. This was strategy. The announcement came months later at a major industry conference. I almost didn't attend, but something told me to be there, not to confront the past, but to close a chapter. When the screen lit up with the list of new majority stakeholders, my name appeared without explanation. For a moment, the room froze, then came the whispers, chairs shifted, heads turned. Across the room, I saw my father stiffen. My brothers leaned forward, disbelief written across their faces. They hadn't recognized me at first. Why would they? The version of me they remembered no longer existed. Later, my mother approached me, her expression fragile and uncertain. "You could have told us," she said softly, as if we were still on familiar ground. I met her eyes, steady and calm. "You chose not to listen when it mattered." There was no anger in my voice. That was the part that unsettled her most. As I walked away, I realized something important. I wasn't standing there to prove my worth. I had already done that alone, quietly, and completely on my own terms. They had once erased me without hesitation. Now they were being forced to see me again not as family, not as a problem, but as power they could no longer ignore. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt the balance shift. I never set out to destroy my family. That was their first mistake, assuming my success was fueled by anger alone. If that had been true, I would have burned out long before I ever reached this point. What carried me forward wasn't hatred. It was clarity. Owning their company's biggest rival changed the way people spoke to me. Suddenly, my calls were returned faster. Meetings were scheduled around my availability. Respect came easily now, but I understood its cost. It had taken years of silence, sacrifice, and being underestimated to earn it. When our companies began crossing paths in negotiations, I stayed professional. No pointed remarks, no reminders of the past. I treated them the same way I treated every other competitor, with preparation and restraint. That calm unsettled them more than any confrontation ever could. One evening, after a long board meeting, my father asked to speak with me privately. His confidence, the kind that once filled rooms, had softened. "You did well," he said, staring at the floor. "We didn't think you could." I smiled gently. I know. That was the truth. They had never believed in me. And oddly enough, that belief had been the greatest gift they could have given me. Without their approval to chase, I had been free to build something real. My mother reached out later. Her messages were careful, filled with regret and half apologies. I read them slowly, feeling the weight of what had been lost. I didn't respond right away. Healing, I had learned, didn't mean reopening every door. I didn't reclaim my place at their table. I didn't ask for acknowledgement or forgiveness. I built my own space, one shaped by boundaries, honesty, and earned trust. A place where I didn't have to prove I deserved to belong. The sweetest part of revenge wasn't watching them struggle with the consequences of their choice. It was knowing I no longer needed them to understand my worth. They had disowned me, believing I would fade into nothing. Instead, I became someone they had to respect from a distance. And as I walked away from the life they once controlled, I realized I had already won, not because I bought their rival, but because I built a future they could never take from me.